Hello, guys, and welcome to the Legendary Ladies podcast. And you are here with me and Morgan. And what's so fun is that we are recording 2 episodes at the same time because you're gonna be like, "Where's Amy?" And it's just like, well, we are just recording 2 episodes at the same time. I'm sure Amy will be back next time where we have some fun stuff that we're planning on recording. But yes, so we are talking about Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse. As you guys know, I was super excited for this movie. And it met all my expectations. I loved it. But we want to talk about a different angle of it because, again, everyone and their mom is talking about Across the Spider-Verse. We could both just say, "Wow, the art's amazing." It's like a comic book. It's a great movie. It's wonderful. Like we could just say that all day, but instead, we are going to talk about the ending of the movie. And how movies have maybe just don't end anymore. And if it works or doesn't work. So obviously, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, watch the movie before you see this episode. So let's talk about the ending of Spider-Verse, kind of introduce what we're talking about. Now, this was a part one or a part two of the movie. So it's a trilogy. It's Into the Spider-Verse was the origins, does have a beginning, middle, and end. And this movie is probably one of the most I've ever seen a movie not end, which honestly helped though. I liked it. And I know maybe it's polarizing for some people, but it seemed like most people liked it, where it's to be continued. And the reason why I think it worked for this movie in particular, A, it seems like the next movie's coming out soon, but B, because it's trying to reflect a comic. That's it. Literally, that's how a comic book would end. So you're like, oh, that's really cool. I want to see what happens next. But I don't feel that way about all movies. And maybe because I just have a special place for this franchise in my heart and I just love the Spider people. And I felt like it was jarring in all the right ways. But what did you feel about how did you feel about the ending of this one?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's tough to judge because I knew going in that it didn't really end. Like I knew
Mm.
I managed to avoid all spoilers, but the only spoiler I did get was that like it had a cliffhanger ending and that like part 3 that's coming out next year was going to be like the true ending. So I wasn't surprised. I wasn't like, "Wait, what? It's not ending." Um and I feel like I probably would have felt different if I didn't go into the movie knowing that. Like, I
I
might have
did
been like,
not.
"What?"
My brother was because he came with us and he saw the first movie. He's not like a huge superhero fan. He just really went to the movie to see it for me. And he's like, "Yeah, no, I like the movie a lot, but I hated that ending." And he's like, "It was so weird." And I was like, "No, that's the thing I liked about it." He's like, "Yeah, but like, why didn't it end?" He's like, "I went to the movies and I wanted an ending result." I'm like, "Well, that's we gotta see the next one." And obviously, like we've been living in a trend since Harry Potter, I would say, started this, where I believe it was Harry, because I think it was Harry Potter was first, and then Twilight did it, and then Hunger Games did it, where
Yeah.
there's like, we need to make these movies more money on these movies. Like this is the last book. How do we really make even more money? And with Harry Potter, they made part one and part two of that last movie that I did not see, so I have no opinion on. Twilight, they made part one and part two of that movie that I also did not see. And Hunger Games, I've seen everything except part one and part two of those last movies. So I must have a really bad relationship with part one and part twos, but
You
I
see a
did
part
not
1
see
and
it.
part 2 and you think, "No, thanks. No,
No,
thanks. I
thank
I don't
you.
I don't need to know how this story ends."
Hunger
Yeah, I
Games,
will.
I really should have saw the end. 'Cause at least that I was like, "Oh, I'm following this." But I remember just not liking Mockingbird, Mockingjay, and I'm like, "I'm
Mockingjay,
good."
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I felt like for the Harry Potter ones, like, the 7th book in that series was pretty dense and, like, squeezing everything into one movie, I could see splitting it up. I mean, it was obviously, just a cash grab, but I could see splitting it up into 2 movies. Um, the Twilight one was, like, a little ridiculous. Like, there was, like that book, like, basically nothing happened in that whole book, and those 2 that two-parter was hard to deal with. Like, the first part of that two-parter was just, like, truly, like, an experience. I walked out of that movie, and I think I turned to Sarah, who went to go see all those movies with me, and I was like, "Wow, that was a movie that we saw." But yeah, this one
Didn't Hobbit have 3 parts?
yes. So I think I've mentioned before that, like, when I had my bad virus a couple months ago, and I couldn't go anywhere, um, we decided to watch all the Lord of the Rings movies,
God
one
bless.
each night. Um, and we did like Friday through Sunday. It was great. It was so much fun. We watched the director's cuts. They were all like 100 hours each. We were really in there. We were like, but it turns out
And that didn't
those
make
are
you sicker. That just made you feel better.
it turns it's really enjoyable to watch those because they're good movies. And then we were so hyped, right? We were like, yeah, let's keep this going. Let's watch all the Hobbit movies. That was a mistake,
Oh no.
because those are not that good. And so we got like 2 movies in and we still have not watched the last Hobbit movie.
Oh,
And maybe one day we will. I hope that for us. But
maybe
yeah,
next time you're sick.
maybe next time I'm sick. There is definitely a difference between like this movie or this property has enough to support like a multi-part movie and like, hey, this thing made a lot of money. Let's split it into as many parts as possible in order to make as much money as we possibly can. And like you can tell.
Or when it's purposeful. I think the reason why Spider-Verse works so well, that it was very obviously part of the plot. Like they're like, we wanted to do this. This is like creatively we wanted to do this. And then like again, when you look at Harry Potter, it's like, yeah, like creatively, like movies just don't run that long. So like we have to do this. But then like you said, like The Hobbit or Twilight, where it's like, oh, you really just wanted to make money. Okay.
And I feel like you can usually tell. You can usually tell when it's like they're all, to be honest, most of them are cash grabs, but like you can tell when it's like the material can justify the extra movie or whatever, and when the material kind of can't. And it's like there's like a lot of padding. There's just like a lot of scenes where you're like, was this necessary? I didn't feel that way about the Spider-Verse though. I did feel like it felt like a full idea in that movie, and then it just ended on a cliffhanger versus being like the first chap like the first half of a book or something where it's like,
Right.
where's the rest of this? Like I felt like thematically it felt like a full arc. It felt like a full story. It was like telling the stories of these characters, and we'll get the ending in the last movie, but I didn't feel like it was like a cash grab or anything like that.
And I think it was so anti MCU, which is why I think everyone was so surprised, because MCU is always like, yeah, it's about continuations, but there's an ending where you're like, well, this is the end chapter 1. Now you got to get to chapter 2. This is like half of a chapter in a good way, where it's like, whoa, there's no ending credit. Like Marvel built ending credits. What do you mean there's no ending credit? What? And like people, people have such expectations when it comes to superhero films. So I found that very fascinating. And I think this kind of brings to the larger question again of the MCU and these like universes that we built. Movies. I'm guessing when Movie Man in the 1800s, or like the whoever invented the movie, we'll call him Movie Man.
Oh
He like
yes, the movie
Mr.
man.
Movie,
When,
Mr.
when,
Movie
when
Man.
Mr. Movie took off his monocle and looked out across at all the movies he could make.
He's like, ooh, what can I do? Like, I don't think they thought, man, I'm going to make, sagas of movies. And obviously, like, who started this? I mean, from what I could guess, is Star Wars. I'm guessing I don't know if that's the first trilogy, but at least it's the first trilogy from like our mainstream thoughts of like, oh, wait, you can make a movie and look forward to this next movie and then do a movie after that. And that kind of started it all. But then the MCU is like, wait, how about we do this for years on years on years and years, and nothing ever ends? And that was something you weren't on for, Morgan, but our Patreon episode. If you guys want to check it out, you guys should join our Patreon. But we did an episode about Guardians of the Galaxy, and one of my biggest frustrations was that this was supposed to be the last movie of Guardians. Like, James Gunn is moving on. He's going to be at DC Comics, and spoiler alert for the movie. It's not that much of a spoiler, but they're like, Star-Lord will return. That's like at the ending credit. And I actually verbally like said what in front, like so loud, everyone could hear me. I was so angry and pissed off. And this is like opening night, this movie, so people are like in the theater, and I was just like so pissed off. I'm like, why can't these movies end? Just give me an ending. Like, Guardians does not need to continue, and especially not Star-Lord. Like any other character, like he's like the main one. Like you said, Endgame. Like, this is supposed to be over. Like, why am I seeing Thor again? Why am I seeing this character again? And it's just like so frustrating that we now live in a world where movies used to be so finite. It's not a TV show. That's a TV show's serious. Like, I love TV shows. I like TV shows, at least this type of storytelling, more than movies, because you get to see serialized stories, but movies are not. They're not for that. They're the
Yeah.
opposite of that.
I feel like the Marvel movies are kind of a glorified TV show, and like that's kind of one of the bigger critiques I've heard of like the Marvel movies is that like, they're basically like watching like a big long TV show. And yeah, it makes sense. You have to, if they created a system where you do
They're
kind of
based
have
on
to.
comics.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way that they are kind of based on comics in the fact that like, these big things happen within the universe, the big, Avengers movies where everybody gets together and you kind of need to know about what happened when those like crossover events happen. But
Mm.
you could probably skip out on a couple of the middle movies, but you still might miss something. Yeah, it's created like it's the Marvel movies are created more like a traditional TV structure where you do have to like watch each episode, and each episode is a movie to like keep up with what's happening within the MCU. And because of that, I don't think it's very comic-y where like nobody really ever dies, nobody really ever like goes off into the sunset. I mean, I guess Robert Downey Jr. and Chris
He's
Evans
the only
and
one,
Scarlett
yeah.
Johansson have, but
Especially Scarlett Johansson.
she was like, "Sorry, I finally got my solo movie, but my character is dead." Poor Black Widow has been treated so dirty. Um, but yeah, like I think that like they're not movies the way that we think of movies as like a full story with a beginning, middle, end. It's more like a movie series.
But look at
Um,
Fast and Furious is a great example of that too,
that's
where it's like
also true.
they are like, this is the last movie, but actually we have another 5 parts. And it's just like, man, like, and it goes back to, this, and I love franchise movies. I'm not trying to shit on them. I have a good time with them and I'll go to the theaters and see them. But I do wish there was more room in the theater for something that usually goes on streaming now, like those little art house films or even like the comedies or just like, horror movies, and we've talked about this before, horror movies feels like this really safe space where you actually could get original storytelling and people go to the theaters for it. And that's why I love horror so much and why like I'll go see any horror movie because it's like, oh, weirdly enough, most of the time it's not based on a franchise. Even a horror, when you think about movies based on franchises that continue, you think about like Halloween, you think
Yeah.
about, all these movies that actually did that and have so many freaking movies. So it's weird that we live in this place with movies where if you want to go to the theater, you really can only see franchise films, and it's probably going to be the 12th part.
Yeah, it's really true, and I think it has something to do with like how how expensive some movies are, how much they have to make back from the box office, and then just like nobody really wants to take a chance on anything anymore, because everything is terrible now, right? And everything is made for maximum profit.
Yeah.
So there's not like a lot of artisticness that's going on. Like there used to be, these smash hit movies that would just be one movie and like
Remember The Artist? Like, remember that movie that was literally called The Artist and it won an
yes,
Oscar
and it was
and it
in
was just
black
a
and
movie.
white.
Yeah. And like people, that was like the most popular movie of that year.
And, like, think about Titanic. Like, could you imagine Titanic being, like, a huge thing now? It's, like, based off of a ship that sank. Like, that's not, like, everything now is IP because they know that they've got a built-in audience. Like, you can't tell an original story anymore because, like, what if the audience first off, the audience doesn't know that story and they're not, they don't have a connection to it. And I think that started happening when, like, I mean, it's been getting worse and worse over the years where it's like if you want to find a movie that isn't connected to any IP, like good luck, but like definitely like the superhero movies becoming bigger and bigger and more profitable
Mm.
started to turn,
Look at
I think, the
Flash.
ship in that way.
I'm in the ship. That's a good that's a good analogy to it. But it's interesting too because the Titanic is even a good example of technically it is an IP because it's something that I don't remember exactly how this works, but if it's an event that happened in the past, and let's say it's just an event that happened, you could utilize it. But if you base it on like a newspaper article, that person wrote that newspaper article. That's their IP.
Yeah,
Like
that's
it's versus,
true.
yeah. So
I
it's
guess
like
that is
that's
true.
like
Oh,
Titanic is like Oppenheimer. We have an Oppenheimer movie coming out. That's like it's still kind of IP, even though it's not.
I mean, I guess you could make the point that if it's based on a book, if it's based on a
True event.
historical event, if it's based on, like, we really don't get a lot of, like, just completely unique ideas anymore. Like, we don't get, like, George Lucas making, like, a weird Star Wars anymore.
Which is interesting, and I think why Everything Everywhere All at Once did so well, because it was like, oh, it's everything we like about Marvel movies. There's all these multiverses and there's action, but it's an original story. Crazy.
Yeah, I know.
So that's kind of wild. But yeah, I guess my question is, are you tired of it? Are you like you part of the problem?
And I think I'm part of the problem. I do really like movies based on IP. I'm counting down the days to Barbie. So
Oh
I'm
yeah, me
definitely
too.
it's gonna be phenomenal. The movie of the year. But no, I think that, like, I am kind of part of the problem. I do really like all the Marvel movies. I enjoy going to see them. Enjoy some of the DC movies. Like, I do kind of like stuff that's based on IP because you got that, that knowledge, that nostalgia factor. Like, they know what they're doing when they're, like, building these. But I don't like that, like, you can't go see something interesting and weird and unique anymore. Like, they're
Unless it's
they don't
streaming.
unless it's streaming, like, they just don't exist. And it has kind of, like, the IP push has kind of killed the romantic comedy genre almost entirely. I mean, I can't remember, like, the last big rom-com that, like, went to theaters. I mean, I'm sure that they're still
I it's
making them.
Crazy Rich Asians was the last one.
Yes, you're right, and that was, like,
Mm.
years ago, and it did really well because guess what? Like, people never stopped liking rom-coms. The rom-coms just started getting bad. Uh,
Really bad. Because
really so
there was
bad.
a big era of like probably like when I was growing up, more of this really bad
Oh my
rom-coms.
god, yes. There was a period of time when every rom-com was, like, not good at all. But yeah, like, I do feel like, I don't know, everything is kind of based off of some sort of, thing that they hope people know about, whether it is a historical event or a comic book or, like, a Twitter thread that somebody did that really popped off. Like, it's really hard to, like, look at a list of movies and be like, are any of these just, like, an original thing that somebody came up with?"
Like, can
Um
I see a trailer of a really cool story where I'm like, whoa, I'm just kind of seeing this for the first time? Because again, like we were saying, even trailers, like Barbie, we're waiting for this freaking trailer because it's Barbie. But it's like, if it was just like, if Barbie wasn't based on Barbie, would we care?
No, no, and I think for some of them, like, yeah, because I think, like, the Barbie trailer was really cool and, had, like, a very distinct visual style and seems like it's doing some interesting stuff, but, like,
It's still about this blonde girl in this fake world
yeah,
type
yeah,
thing.
like
There's
a
something
I
interesting
think I
about
would
it.
yeah, I think I would probably watch, like, like a whatever Barbie would be without the IP, like, kind of a Legally Blonde kind of situation
Mhm.
of, like, a living doll or whatever. But yeah,
But
but some
also
of the
life
stuff.
size, so
Exactly. Some of the stuff, absolutely, we're interested because we know of it before we go into the trailer, and we're excited we're excited to see the trailer. So we're coming in with some preconceived notions of, like, what it's gonna be about. Um, yeah, I think yeah, I mean, it is kind of a bummer that you can't, like, go to the movies and be like, "I don't know what that thing's gonna be about at all." Like, yeah, it's Fast 10, like, Vin Diesel's gonna, like, turn a car into a spaceship and
and
go
it's
to
gonna be
space.
awesome.
It's gonna
Uh
be amazing.
but then like yeah, even the art house films, because again, one of the movies I really liked this year was Air. I really enjoyed it. It's about the marketing of how Nike was a shoe company that wasn't very popular until the Air Jordans, and like how they did that. That's kind of the story. And that is an art house film, but it's still based on a historical event, and it's based on, you guessed it, Michael Jordan. So it's just like, of course, he's a name, and it's, and then we were just talking about Oppenheimer. Like that's a, like, obviously when you have big directors, that's another thing. That's kind of a name that's attached. Or like, all
Mhm.
right, the reason I'm gonna go see this is because you know Christopher Nolan's doing it. That's why most people are excited for it. I mean, that's such a weird movie where I'm like, I don't know why everyone's talking about it so much besides that it's a Christopher Nolan film. It's just
I
like, yeah, I'm
know.
gonna watch it because it's like people are talking about it and one of my friends really wants to go see it. But other
It's
than
gonna be
that,
real depressing, probably.
yeah, we're saying Barbie first because it comes out the same
Nice,
weekend. We all
nice.
agreed we're not because
Barbie's the
Barbie's gonna get
priority.
spoiled. Oppenheimer's not getting spoiled.
No. Oh no, did the bomb go off?
Whoa, that's so weird.
What? That is hilarious. Yeah, no, I do think it's like pretty interesting. I will say like Spider-Verse for me was interesting because I can't remember. I think we said a couple of examples, but I can't remember a lot of movies that like seemed like they were like halfway through a story and they were like, "Come back next time," and I was like,
I,
"What?"
I can't think of any that it's a movie, and that's why I think they did it so right. It was just like it was so purposeful. It was also so character driven, and it's kind of the opposite of this conversation we're having because I think something that frustrates me about the MCU a lot is that they're
Mhm.
not really comic movies. I always say that they're not really. A lot of times they're not even really based on the story of the comics. They just use the name, and they're like, "Oh, this is a version of Captain America," but like the Spider-Verse movies are really, really based on the comics. Like they, especially this movie, they pulled lines from the Edge of Spider-Verse issue 2. Like all that Gwen stuff. There's dialogue stripped from those comics. Like it's fascinating to see. So it's like it's also a story so much about character, and I'm not saying the MCU movies aren't, but a lot of times it is so driven by plot and twists, and it's just like, but I just want to see Captain America being Captain America. I don't need him to see whatever else they're trying to do with the MCU movies. But like I just love how character driven Spider-Man is, and I think that's why that cliffhanger was so like, whoa. Like I just love this character and I want to live in this world more, and that is such a good cliffhanger.
Yeah, I think that like just the Spider-Verse movie. I mean, I'm gonna like repeat what everybody has been saying, which is that it's like one of the best comic book movies I've seen. And it just was so beautifully animated and like the
Mhm.
art, the different art styles to show them the different worlds. And it was just like I'm sure some of that art style took forever. You could just see the care and like, the care that went into making this movie. And I think to your point about it feeling like reading a comic, like they made it so that like if you paused it, like some things would like look like a panel of a comic. Like as somebody who doesn't read comics all the time but has read, a good amount of them, like even the way that sometimes the screen would progress would remind me of like looking from one panel to the next panel or looking
They would
at a
have
page.
actual panels. They would have like
Mhm.
the white border.
It was so cool, and I think the way that that it just sort of ended with, like, a cliffhanger of, like, "Come back next time to find out," it's a very comic booky way to end something, you know? It's like, it's not the end of the arc, we're in the middle, so of course it's gonna end with a cliffhanger.
Yeah, with the to be continued, that's literally how comics are written. Like if
Yeah.
you look at the structure of a comic, it opens up saying, okay, this is what happened last time, which they did. The middle, you get some action, you get some progression. The end, you have to end on a cliffhanger so people want to get the next issue. That's literally how a middle of an arc would work at a comic. So I think that's why it works so well here. And I guess there's the bigger question of what does this mean for IP? What does this even mean for Spider-Man? Like when this is over, like are they going to focus on other characters? Are they done with this? It's just like such a weird place where it's like we just did an episode on Ted Lasso, which weirdly enough is going to come out next week and not this week because of
Yeah.
how things are going. But we were talking about like, oh, do we want to see Ted Lasso continue? And it's just like, yeah, there's a big part of me that does, but then there's a little part of me that's like, well, Ted Lasso did well. Can we just kind of wipe our hands and just try something new? Because we could talk about like Barbarian from last year, that movie where
Oh,
it's just a
so
slam
good.
dunk. It was so good. It did really well in streaming. Like a lot of people didn't watch the movie in theaters. Like we watched the movie. I remember I told you about the movie when I
Yeah,
saw it. I was
yeah.
like, this is blowing my mind. It's such a good freaking film. And it's just like, it was just kind of this coincidence that people liked it. And the Menu, I think, is a very similar thing where a lot more people talked about the Menu when it went on streaming than when people actually saw in theaters, because it's
Yeah.
like these original stories. And what I liked about Barbarian and the Menu too is that they never were meant to, or at least from what it seems like they're built on, they're not supposed to be continuations. I love a good movie where it's just like, wow, that was just like a good beginning, middle, and end. And A Quiet Place is a good example of that, where I really liked the movie until the last 2 minutes of the first one. I don't know if you saw it, but
I did see the first one. It's been a while though.
the ending is just like they pretty much allude to that there's gonna be a sequel, and I remember thinking that sucks. I'm like, I like this movie because, and I didn't watch the sequel. I think it was around
I also haven't seen the sequel to A Quiet Place yet.
because I was just like, no, that was a really good one and done movie, and I want to mix. Like, I'm not saying I want to live in a world where there's no Spider-Man movies. Of course I do. Like, I love these franchises, but I just want to go to the theaters and see a Barbarian every once in a while. And I feel like this year especially, I have not seen that at
Yeah,
all.
I think one of the problems is like the reason that these sort of like weirder, more interesting, like more original movies are doing well in streaming, but maybe not necessarily in the box office is that like, it's not free to go to see a movie.
Yeah, no one wants
Um
to see. Yeah, no one wants to
And
pay it.
so, like, if people are going to the movies, a lot of times they'll be like, I want to go see a thing that I know I already like, right? So, like, I know I like the Marvel movies. I know I like Spider Man. I know I like Indiana Jones. I'm going to go see that. I'll go see
And
that in
people are
the
going to talk
theaters.
about it. People are going
Yeah.
to talk about it
People are
too.
going to talk about it. I don't want to get spoiled. I need to go see this in the theaters when it comes out. Things like Barbarian, it's like you're taking, if you're taking a risk, you might go see that movie, you might not like it. And
I
I feel
love
like
the risk
people,
though.
me too. But I
That's
feel
my
like
favorite
people
part about going to movies.
are now more risk adverse. They're like, I don't know. I also don't think it helps that I know that this started during the pandemic for a very obvious reason, but I don't think it helps that like the movies come out on streaming like a month after they go in theaters. So like
Yeah.
we were thinking about going to see we really wanted to see the Dungeons and Dragons movie in the theaters. Um and we just kept missing it. We just kept like not being able to make it and like, oh, we'll go next week and we'll go next weekend. Then it just popped up on streaming. And we were
That's
like, I guess we'll
crazy.
just watch it at home. But, like, yeah, like, I think that the gap between theatrical release and hitting streaming is so small now. The Super Mario movie is in theaters, and I can watch it on my couch right now simultaneously,
That's
and it's
so
like,
crazy.
for a lot of people, it's like, if I can watch it at home for free because I have this streaming service, why am I gonna go out and pay $15 for, like, a movie ticket and buy a popcorn? Like, now it's an expensive night. If I'm taking my kids, now it's even more expensive. If I can just watch it at home. So I think that they're kind of like I think, during the pandemic, it made sense, like, yes, definitely
Mm.
release your movies. Don't make people go to the theater. But there
But now,
maybe should be a little bit more of a gap between a movie coming out and a movie hitting streaming because I think that they're just eating into their theatrical
and they're
revenue.
losing money, I'm sure, by doing that because you're not upping sales of your streaming service. I think it's just people who have the streaming service are going to get it.
Yeah. And it used
Yeah,
to be
no,
that like that a movie would come out and then you have to
mm,
wait so many months. You're like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna have to
like
wait 6
6.
months now
Hmm.
to see this movie." And it would come on DVD. Now I'm
Hmm.
aging myself, but it would like come on DVD or like when I was a little VHS or whatever.
That's
And
aging yourself a little bit
that's
more.
aging myself a little, but, like, I had all the Disney movies in those, like, VHS,
I
like,
did too.
shell
Yeah.
cases, the best. But you would have to watch it, you would either have to rent it or you'd have to buy it. Now those are ways that you make money. Streaming, I guess you just license it to a streamer, unless that streamer, like, kinda already owns the content because it's, like, the same production house, but, like, you're not making the same kind of money on, like, streaming that you would make by selling like a physical piece of media. So I feel like that's probably also eating into like revenue and making studios less likely to take a chance on like a weird idea and more likely to like say, "Hey, like have we done a movie about like Polly Pocket yet?"
I would watch it. What's interesting is that there's certain movies that, like, you look at James Cameron, right? Because I was thinking, like, what was the popular movies that came out this year? Mario. That was like the biggest movie of the year.
Yes.
But Avatar was really, really big, and guess what? It just came out on Disney Plus like this week or like this month.
Ah,
So it took a really long time for it to get to Disney Plus.
interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize it took that long to get there. I
'Cause I've
figured
been
it
like
would have
hearing
taken, like, a lot
Spotify ads
longer.
about it. I was like, what? Like it just came on? Like it really did just come on like either a couple of weeks ago or like this month.
Yeah, that is way different than, like, the Mario situation where I can simultaneously watch it at home while it is still in the theaters.
But Mario did so freaking well. So
So I
what's the
guess they were like,
conversion
we
there?
don't even need the extra money from Mario. Just watch it at home then.
Because they also have like the international people watching it as well, and that kind of goes in the box office numbers as well. But yeah, I mean, I think that's why they keep pushing out the superhero stuff, which is fine. Like I really do like superhero movies, and I'll watch all of them. But I definitely I also feel like it depends on the quality too. Like the ones I love are these Spider-Man movies, but like I could go see another MCU and I'm like, like even Flash, like there's parts of me where I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I'm gonna go see it. And I'm just like,
Excuse
we'll
me, you mean the
see.
greatest movie of all time? You are
Right.
doubting?
Right.
According to Jaden Smith?
I might be doubting it a little bit as someone, and I know this is blasphemy, but I don't love the Michael Keaton movies that much. I don't hate them, but they're just like I watched them as a kid and never really went back.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I've seen them, they're fine. But like there's nothing in the movie where I'm like, that's for me. So I'm just like, but Spider-Man, everything was for me. Like it was everything I love. And it's weird because like for DC, like I like Batman a lot. Like
Yeah.
it's a franchise I enjoy, and like I like the Flash, but I've seen it a lot already. So I'm just like, oh man, like even the superhero movies, is there like Shazam's a great example where I really like the first Shazam, and I did not like the second Shazam.
I heard it was not great.
No, it was not. And I'm just like, even some of these superhero movies that just come, and then you have the TV shows that you can't even keep up with, where you're like, oh, you got they have
I
another
feel
Marvel
like
show coming out.
yeah, and I really like all of these things. Like I watch them, but even I'm like I like feel like we're hitting that saturation point where it's like it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to keep up with all of the TV shows and all of the movies across all of the different like Marvel and DC and all of this stuff and all of that stuff and yeah, it is nice that it is nice the Spider-Verse movies are a trilogy and you know that going in. They're 3 movies. They're kind of self-contained. I think that there was like there's a couple of references within this one to like MCU stuff, but nothing that where you are like you need to have watched the full connected
No.
universe to understand it. Like it was so refreshing to see a Marvel movie or even a superhero movie that wasn't like hinged on a elaborate connected universe in which like you maybe might miss some joke or some line or something if you hadn't seen the previous 10 films. Like Spider-Verse is kind of its own thing and like I mean it could be I think because of the topic we're talking about like multiverses and stuff like that, but like I think that they've done such a good job of like just making it feel like a movie.
And you could kind of tell that there's one synchronized voice. Like you could tell this is someone's baby. And that's kind of what I love about Spider-Verse is that I feel even though it's an IP, it feels like an original movie. It feels like it's just like one vision. And I miss that. And I don't know if every MCU movie hits that note where I'm like this feels like someone's passion project. Like
Yeah, I
I
feel
don't
like
know if it does.
I feel like because it was like animation, they didn't give it that same like MCU treatment where it's like, okay, well, like you can do whatever you want, but also we really need to establish this character and also the end has to establish this new storyline that we're setting up in the main Marvel
Mhm.
Cinematic Universe and you're like, okay, is that it? It's just like I have to do this, and you can sometimes like feel it within the movies where you're like, "Ooh, that was a little sweaty," right? Like that was a little sweaty that they had to like mention that or bring that in. Whereas like this felt like this was like a vision of somebody. Like this is the story they wanted to tell. It doesn't have to set up a bunch of other spin-off things. I don't know, maybe the third one will set up a bunch of spin-off things, but this one at least didn't. Like it wasn't trying to set up like, 5 different spin-off universe movies or, answer the question of like what happened in like to another character from a different movie from this thing or that thing so like yeah it was kind of a nice to be like get a break from the interconnectedness of it all.
But still have all of these multiverse characters matter, which I think is interesting too. Like you could see Spider-Man India and see his whole story, but like He matters. He matters. He doesn't need his own movie. That's fine. And look, like you said, I doesn't mean for the future that I don't want to see a Spider-Woman movie. That sounds fun, but like, let's finish this trilogy before I get that. Let's
Yeah.
take it. And it's so interesting to say, Sony is kind of figuring this out before like Disney, because Sony for the longest time didn't know what to do with Spider-Man. They're like, we have Spider-Man, and like we're just gonna make Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. And they're like, well, we don't know what to do with this either. Let's make Morbius, let's make a Craven movie, let's do this. And they're still doing that. Like, we're gonna get a Craven movie this year,
Oh
and we
no.
still got Morbius. But I'm
Oh,
like,
God bless. God bless. It's Morbin time. My
it's more.
favorite
I still
my
haven't seen it.
I still haven't seen it either. I didn't go out for the re-release, surprisingly enough.
I know.
My
I
favorite
missed it.
thing is how badly they misjudged like internet sarcasm for like actual interest in the movie. They're like, everybody's talking about Morbius. People love it. Let's bring it back out into theaters. It's like
Look,
it's
they made
Morbin
money.
time. They
It's
made
Morbin
some
time.
amount of money, but like no one really went out to see it because it was mostly just a joke that people on the internet were doing. This is like the lesson is like never listen to people on the internet.
No.
They're not gonna tell you anything real. It's mostly gonna troll you.
Yeah, no, that was the biggest trolling movie. I am curious for movies like Craven, and just be like, well, we haven't seen a trailer of that one yet, and it's like they only own Spider-Man, so it's just so interesting to see. Like, we're trying to build
What
our
is
own thing.
okay? What is Craven? Because you are my spider expert.
So Craven, he's one of the bigger spider villains. He just like wants to kill Spider-Man. That's like his life mission is to hunt Spider-Man, like to hunt him. And he's like a big villain because of it, because he really like it was one of the darker stories of Spider-Man. Like it really turned the tone of Spider-Man was when that happened, because he was just such a dark character. And believe in the end of that story, Craven dies. Forget how, it's been a while since I've read it. But it's just like one of the most classic Spider-Man stories is Craven the Last Hunt. So he's a really big Spider-Man villain. It's like he's a big Spider-Man villain because he wants to kill Spider-Man.
Yeah, how do you tell Craven's story independent of Spider-Man? Like I don't really understand how that even works if I think about it.
Me either. So I'm very curious to see how they're gonna tackle that one. And that's like what's so weird about the villain Spider-Man movies they've been going for. It's like Morbius. No one cared about him when he was a Spider-Man villain. Like, what are you doing with that? And then there's another movie.
How dare you disrespect Morbius that way?
I know, right? I'm such a bad person. And there's another movie that's coming out called the Madam Web movie, or maybe it's called Spider-Woman now, but I know Spider-Woman's in it. But Madam Web, she's a character, and they actually, I think, mention it in the animated movie, like the web of life. They mention about the big web of life in across the Spider-Verse. And she's the one who kind of controls it. She's the one who sees the future. She's like part of the web of life. She's a blind old woman. That's her story. And they're making a movie about her.
It's gonna be about her when she was young and hot.
What I think they're trying to do is introduce other
Sexy
Spider-Woman.
Madam Web.
Sexy Madam Web. I think she's just like, I don't know why they would call it Madam Web, but yeah, I think they're like gonna introduce other Spider-Woman. So I think
what if
that's
they
what's happening.
Madam Web played by like Helen Mirren? They're like, it's Madam Web, but she is hot. Look at Helen. And Helen's like,
yeah,
keeping it so tight, Madam Web.
See, I would watch that. I did hear that.
I would actually watch that.
Because it just is like more a Morbin time. I do hear that Black Cat's gonna be in this one. She's like a really big spider character. You might even know her.
Yeah.
So like I'm like, maybe it'll be interesting, but like Sony is just like, let's see what sticks. We're just kind of lucky that we have this little Spider-Verse pocket, because like you could say, yeah, Sony's doing it all right, and you're like, see their lineup coming up, you're like, oh. And again, Venom was a great example of that, where everyone's like, what the fuck's this Venom movie? And you were just lucky that the performance was so silly that people were like, this is a silly movie I like.
Yeah, I think Tom Hardy probably saved that movie, like single-handedly saved that movie by just being like, you know what I'm gonna play this as? Weird. And everyone's like, yes, I love it. I love that energy from you, Tom Hardy. But yeah, some of their choices are very, very strange. It is very funny that all they have left is Spider-Man, and they're like they don't even really have Spider-Man. They just have his like universe. So they have to be like, well, and then in 2025, the J. Jonah Jameson movie comes out.
Oh man, I hope that'd be a great movie. I'm looking at their list now. So Craven the Hunter comes out near my birthday, October 6th. So that's coming out this year. Madam Web comes out February. So we're really gonna find out about this
Oh
Madam
my
Web
God.
movie soon. Emma Roberts is in it. The girl
Is she
from
Madam Web?
Euphoria. I don't know who. Let me see if they have
Wait, is
that. So
Zendaya in this movie? I thought she
no,
was
the
oh,
other girl,
with
the
with
blonde
the big
one.
eyes. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
was
she's in
Sydney
it.
something or other? Sydney Sweeney,
Daisy
maybe?
Johnson's in it. Yeah, Sydney Sweeney's in it.
Oh.
I think actually, not Daisy Johnson. Dakota Johnson is playing Madam Web. So
What? What?
yeah, so
The
she
old
will
lady?
be Madam Web.
I told you they were gonna make her sexy. I just
I'm
can't let an old
excited for
lady
it.
be old.
Let me see if I could, just for the video people, just show you what Madam Web looks like. Is that
I
what?
desperately want to know what Web looks like, and then just think about how they cast Dakota Johnson in it, and laugh.
Get ready. So this is her
No, you
on the
have to get out
right.
of here. What?
Yeah, this is her. She's like a blind old lady, like
This is
old lady.
like a tiny old lady, who's got like what are those like glasses, like
I think it's just like
sunglasses?
a not even. She just has like a wrap around her eyes.
Oh, and she's got like creepy hands out and like a black dress. It's not. Yeah, I love that they they decided to cast like a bunch of just young hot ladies and no old women at all in this movie. Maybe we'll be wrong and we'll go see Madam Web and it'll be like, "Oh, the whole thing is mostly about this old lady."
You know,
But
I'm
I
so
doubt
ready
it.
for that movie because I just think it's just gonna be so fun. I just think it's just gonna be such a fun movie.
What if it's like about like a day in the life of Madam Web? She like goes to bingo.
I hope so. And then she's just like, I'm part of the web of life. I could see the future of my bingo cards. I was also just so curious, like why Black Cat's in it. It's just like Black Cat is bisexual. Maybe we'll get to see a little bit of that.
Ah,
Probably not,
probably
but
not.
just
No.
saying, just putting it out there.
They always want to make money off the international market. So usually the gay is like, "Hey, did you see those two people kiss off in the background? They were really far
It's
back there,
them.
but they kissed and we're inclusive, right? That makes us inclusive." It's like,
You like that, right?
I mean, I feel like you could do a better job, but okay.
Or you don't promote your film at all. I think Strange World's a great example of
Oh
that.
my god, I didn't even know that came out.
Yeah, or it was a Disney movie because they really also I didn't love the movie, so it didn't help that it was
It's a
not
bummer.
good. And it also just didn't help for that. Yeah, you don't think Frozen 3 that we're gonna get gay yes?
They're definitely gonna give us gay Elsa.
No.
It's happening. I know that you're like a gay Elsa
Oh,
truther, so
I'm definitely a gay Elsa truther. I think what's gonna be if it ever does happen, because like they can't make her straight. Alex and my brother, he was just like, well, yeah, they're just gonna make her straight. I'm like, I don't think they're gonna go that far, but I think they're gonna like hint it so much, like hint it that when they're like, there's people that are happy, but like never confirm anything. They like look at each other as something like, there it was.
like maybe they'll like walk off to vacation hand in
Yes.
hand, and you'll have
Yeah.
to just like fill in the details about the epic love
100%.
that they have for each other.
Unless Disney's like, we really don't want to do anything with Frozen anymore, which like
No,
I don't see any reality
I doubt that. I
because
doubt that.
there's no other franchise that was as big as Frozen. Maybe Encanto, but
Yeah, I
even
mean,
so,
Encanto's huge right now, like the
yeah.
Bruno stuff and all that, but yeah, no, I doubt it very much, but yeah, it didn't, I wonder if you went into the movie not knowing that it was gonna be a cliffhanger, if that would, like, have annoyed you as you walked out, like, I wanted to see what the end was.
Not knowing or knowing.
Not knowing, because I went in knowing and I was like, "Yeah, okay, this is the cliffhanger everyone was talking
I
about."
didn't know, so I was okay with it.
Mm.
Yeah, and I was shocked because I was just wanted Mayday. And I was like, she wasn't in this movie
I was
that
gonna
much.
ask you what you thought of Mayday because the last
She's
time we talked
cute.
Spider-Man, you were
Mm.
really excited to see her on screen.
She was cute, but I kept thinking like, when are we gonna see Teen Mayday? But honestly, what's so interesting, again, this is just me trying to manifest whatever. We saw a lot of spider heroes in this. There's not a lot left. So I feel like if you're trying to introduce new spider heroes, you might want to do Teenage Mayday in the next one.
Yep.
And they focus on her a lot too, so I wouldn't be surprised if they were like building towards that. And also, I was right that they were going to introduce Mayday in the first place, so believe me, they might do
Yeah,
it.
there you go. See? The prediction worked the last time.
It
So
did work.
so after the next Spider-Verse movie, so say
Mhm.
we get the trilogy, it's
Right.
over, and they're like, "You know what? Everyone loves these. We gotta make more of them."
I think they're making another Spider-Gwen movie. I think they're gonna make a Spider-Gwen.
Ah,
I think that was already planned. Like, they were supposed to
okay.
make a Spider-Woman movie.
I was gonna ask what you would what would you want the another spin-off to be?
I would really like to see it sucks because I don't wanna say I wanna see more Peter B. Parker because, like, I obviously wanna see more of Miles, like, we've seen the white Peter before, but
Yeah.
I think the only shame is that we haven't seen a lot of Mary Jane. So, like, the reason I would wanna see more of, like, Peter B. Parker is just, like, I wanna see more of Mary Jane. She's a cool character, and this version of her seems really cool.
Yeah, I would love to see, I love Miles, but I do kinda feel like I mean, I guess this was like if Spider-Gwen is gonna get her own spin-off, then he could get his own spin-off. I would love,
Mhm.
like, more Miles. But yeah, I don't think that we've ever seen, like, a older Peter Parker, like a
Not in the
married
movies,
not
yeah.
in the movies, like a married with a kid Peter Parker. I think that would, like I don't want, like, a I'm not sure if I want, like, a trilogy of that, but I would love, like,
Nah, one movie.
one movie would be great. I think that would be really fun, and, I think Charlie Day is who does his voice, is,
Mhm.
or no, it's the guy who played Nick on New Girl,
Yes,
um,
I forget his
Jake
name.
Johnson, I think,
Let's say Peter
but
B.
his voice for that Peter character is very funny, so I could definitely see, like, like an action comedy movie with this version of Peter Parker. I think I would wanna see that.
And again, it goes back to Team Mayday, but I think they could really do a movie with that because they kind of build it in. And Mayday's she's a cool character. One thing that is interesting about her is that Peter is retired at that point. He lost his leg
Oh,
in the comics, so it's just like, oh,
interesting.
so she kind of does it on her own. So I don't think they'd go that route, but it'd be interesting to see them like team up or whatever. Like I think there's just a lot of story to tell, and that's really cool. But I would want them to take it slow. I wouldn't want to see the Marvel approach where it's like, here's 10 Spider movies. Like, just give me one at a time. I'm cool with
Yeah,
that.
and I think I wouldn't mind if they weren't, a connected universe, like,
Mhm.
if they just kind of happened, there was just, like, a Spider-Gwen movie and maybe, like, later on, there's, like, a Miles Morales movie or a Peter Parker movie, and, like, you don't need to watch all of them to understand the next one that's coming out. Like, there could be references to, like, Peter or, like, Miles in Gwen's movie or Gwen and Miles's movie or, etcetera, but, like, you wouldn't feel like you like, "Oh, well, I have to watch Spider-Gwen, and then I have to watch this, and then I have to do all this homework to finally
Right.
watch this movie." I wouldn't mind taking, like, a step back from the very incredibly interconnected universe where, like, one is it's like where they're like dominoes and they rely on each other and just, like, have them all exist in the same universe instead.
I think what's interesting too, going back to the Spider-Gwen thing, like this movie is honestly more Spider-Gwen's movie than Miles, or at least they share the spotlight a lot. But a lot of her story is told here, where you get to see that internal struggle a little bit more. So I'm curious what that means for that last movie. And
Mhm.
obviously, we'll get the answers to where this universe can go with that. But they really are building Spider-Gwen a lot in this one, where you really get to see her internal struggles and her life. And I find that very fascinating. I would want to see more of it for sure.
Yeah, I thought that they did such a good job with her. I've only read a little bit
Mm.
of her comics, and I was very confused, because I
You
didn't
were
understand.
saying you didn't read the first
I
volume.
I missed the first volume, so I was just like I was just thrown in by like, "Wait, what? Who? Where?" That my cat in the
When?
background just stretching on the wall for some reason. Um, but yeah, so I thought that they did a really good job with her character as much as I, like, know her character, and I thought she was, like, a very cool character I would wanna spend more time with. So I think that they did a really good job with Spider-Gwen in this one and, like, made her into a character that I feel like people are gonna wanna see more of.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic film. Again, that's why we kind of took
Such a
this
good
route.
such a good movie because like otherwise we would have just been like, did you love the part where they went to Mubaiton or how did they pronounce like
I think
Mumbai,
that's how they
Manhattan?
I think that's how they pronounced it.
I loved that Spider-Man, by the way, the
He's fun.
happy-go-lucky one. He was really funny. I would actually watch like more with him.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's what was so fun about this movie in general is that there's like, you want to follow everybody and yeah, even if like not all of them are my favorite spider heroes, like I think they did a much better job with Spider Punk in the movie than they ever did in the comics. Like they
He
just
is a
like
real comic character?
yeah, they're all real comic
What?
characters. Yeah,
There's a real
Spider-Man India is
Spider-Punk?
too. Yeah.
What
They're
is
all
wait,
real
so wait, what is
characters.
Spider-Punk's story in the comics though?
Like pretty much the exact same thing of like he's just like this punk guy who's like anti-establishment and he plays the guitar. So like Gwen, she's drums, he's the guitar. He's like from England. And they play
It,
that around.
is he in like a Spider-Gwen story or is he just
They
his own
meet.
thing?
They do meet.
Mm.
I think he was introduced in Spider-Verse as well. And they were part of this is not a long-lasting team, but they're called the Web Warriors, and they were able to like jump different reality. It pretty much what you saw in the movie. It was that,
Mhm.
except they were a team. They really not stole, but they took a lot from the comics. Like everything that you saw in the movies has happened in the comics. Maybe they like twisted it a little bit. Like Spider-Man India is not that comedic in the comics, but
Mhm.
they made him comedic here. But that all happened. That all exists, which is cool, and I like that.
Whoa, that is really cool. I didn't know. I thought some of them were like jokes. Joke Spider-Man.
Only one, and I think that was Spider Bite. I want to say that the girl who was like kind of on Miles's side. I think she's new.
Oh,
She's the only
really?
one. She's the only one I could think of that I didn't know.
That's hilarious. So, just from like a Spider-Man super fan perspective,
Mhm.
like, was there anything that I mean, what did you like the most about the movie? And then is there anything that like you would critique about it?
No critiques, honestly. Again, I think
I
my
know it's
only
I feel terrible, but I feel like such a shill, but I'm like, I don't actually think I have any notes for this one. This was great. You
no, this is just a good movie.
just a good, really good movie.
I didn't know how to feel about the ending, but I think that worked in its favor. I think that was my only like, oh, I don't know how to feel, but like in a good way. And then with the best parts, I really, really think they did Spider-Gwen's story really well. There's actual panels that they like steal from the comics. Like there's when you look at her origins and when they're like showing her origins, like her being bitten by the spider is actually the art from the comics, which is
Whoa.
really cool. And the whole lines about when she talks to her dad, and also the scene with her dad where he like shoots a gun, that happens completely word to word in the comics. But there's the scene when they actually talk to each other after they confront each other and he's like, I miss you, blah, blah. And then she talks about like why she's Spider Gwen and like why she's still like a good person. It's like, you wear your badge, I wear my mask. This is my badge. Those are direct lines from the comics. Like they
Whoa.
direct lines, which is really, really cool. It was cool to see the band. Like I just really like Gwen a lot. But then like Miles, like he's just such an awesome. I think what's so interesting about Miles in this universe is that they kind of play off of like he's from a different universe and there wasn't the Peter Parker like they did with Ultimate Universe like he's from, but
Mhm.
it also feels different enough where this feels so original to his character. And I don't want to say better than the comics. I would say it's definitely better than the current comics and what they've been doing with Miles. Because I just think the Ultimate Universe, he was a younger version, just a different version. And they really focused on Miles and that's it in the comics. But I like that he just feels so original. And Gwen still feels original, even though she has the same story, which is so unique into a comic movie where you're like, wait, she feels very different from the comic character, but she also feels so similar. And I think they just done such a perfect balance. And I don't think I could have ever imagined being a comic fan and knowing this would ever become. Like I remember like, back in the day when we would get like I remember just like when Superman Returns came out and they would like have rumblings of a Justice League movie. I'm like, that's never gonna happen. Like, what world are
Yeah,
you living
I
in?
remember that
And
too.
Yeah, now we're in a world of like this. Like Mayday never would. I at the point I didn't even think she would get a comic book. Why would I expect her to get a movie or
Yeah,
be in a movie?
I think we kind of talked a little bit early on about like, yeah, like superhero exhaustion and like kind of hitting the saturation point. But I will say, like, some of the nice things is like I never thought I would see Matt Fraction's run of Hawkeye on
Mm-hmm.
screen, and, when I read it back in the day, even when, like, it came out, like, I think a little bit before Avengers, like, the first
Yeah, I
Avengers
think it was like
movie.
2008. It came out.
Yeah,
I want to
and
say
I remember reading it and going like, "Oh, this would make an excellent TV show," but they'll never
right.
make a TV show of this. And like, it's because they are scraping the barrel
Hmm.
now on like, could we make a movie about this character? Like, you
I'm still
get to
waiting for the power pack. That's what I'm waiting for.
yeah, I thought like when Miss Marvel came out and I read that book, I was like, this would be
Mm.
a great TV show. Then they made it into a TV. Like, it
And they
just
killed
feels
her off now. Do you know that in the comics? They killed her
well.
off in a Spider-Man comic.
Oh my god, they killed her off in a Spider-Man comic, not
It's
even
a
in her
whole
own
thing. It's
book.
a whole thing. It's
It's
really
pretty
bad.
messed up. I have a very strong theory about why they killed her off.
They're just trying to promote the movie, and the mutant thing, that too. Yeah,
Yes, I
they're trying
think
to make her a mutant.
they're so because like this version of the MCU version of Miss Marvel is not I think the comic version is Inhuman, right?
Inhuman, yeah, she's
Um
Inhuman because
and she
they
has
thought they were gonna make a movie about it, which it failed, and everything about the Inhumans failed in comics except her.
yeah. And then her powers were really pretty different in the comics than from the show where she just kind of has sparkle hands.
Mhm.
She had these like abilities to like mimic people and get really big and get really small. Um, and I could tell like watching the show, I was like, well, this isn't really I guess they changed her origin a little, and then at the end, there's a big hint about, like, the X-Men, like, the mutants
Right.
are coming, and I was like, "Oh," and then as soon as I heard they were killing her off, I was like, "'Cause 'Cause they're gonna bring her back as a mutant.
Which is so, like
Gonna bring her
I
back
feel
as a
like
mutant. They gotta bring her back into the MCU somehow."
it's just so interesting because one thing the X-Men characters I love are like I like Dazzler a lot. She's this character who do you know Dazzler?
I have a little bit of background with her, but, like, not a ton. She's, like, the blonde with, like, the sparkly
Yeah.
hands.
Yeah, and she's like disco and was out in the 70s, and she's a
Incredible.
character who was a musician, like disco artist, and her mutant power was like she uses sound to create light. And for the longest time, the first introduction of Dazzler, she was not really part of the X-Men. Like they would
Mhm.
invite her, she'd go on some missions, but mostly her story is about being a musician and being a mutant and how to feel about that. I think the X-Men get so caught up in itself that every X-Men has to be an X-Men. And I'm like, I don't think that's always so fascinating. I would love to see a pitch from Marvel where there's just this hero. You get to see, classic Magneto and Professor Xavier goes to this person and says, "Hey, want to join the school or do you want to join the Brotherhood?" And then there's a person who just says, "I'm good." I don't want to join either because it's surprisingly has never happened. And I think giving the opportunity with Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel was so disconnected to the Inhumans, rightfully so. Who
Yeah.
cares? I mean, I'm sure there's people that care about the Inhumans, but not many. Um,
You can
and
write us and tell us why you care, because 'cause I've never managed to make myself care about the
No,
Inhumans.
me either. I never have. And I think that's what's so fascinating about Miss Marvel as a character is that she was connected to heroes like not Spider-Man, but Captain Marvel and Iron Man even. Not Spider-Man. Don't know why you killed her off there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess she does have, like, in the comics, she did have some connection with, like, Miles Morales,
Yeah, Miles,
but
not
not
Peter.
Peter, never Peter, so that's weird.
No. They're just like, this is our flagship book. We want to make sales, so let's kill her off here.
Brutal.
There's a whole thing. But yeah, like what I liked about her is that she's connected to people, but she's in Jersey City. That's her place. She has her own supporting cast members. And it's just like to kill her off in another book and then make her connected to something that has too many connections to people already. Like it's just like the X-Men is so much literally its own island, its own planet of things. And it's just like, she doesn't need to be part of that. It's like, give us a grounded character. That's what we liked about her. So it's just weird and not fun.
Yeah, one of the things I liked about her, and I'm super, super behind on all of her comics, but
Her comics are not even, she doesn't even have a comic right now. So you're good.
then I guess I can catch up. But the thing I liked about her is that like her stuff was so self-contained. It felt like you could just read Miss Marvel and you didn't have to jump into every single crossover, every single event, or like the problem with the X-Men. I love the X-Men. I love the like the 90s cartoons and all of that. Wolverine for life. But like by like kind of who they are, it's like a big group of people, right? So it's like there's not like an individual story that you follow. And I liked that Miss Marvel was kind of off doing her own thing. And like, yeah, now they're just gonna like loop her into the X-Men. She's gonna be like one of the X people. It's whatever.
It's like, I'm
It's
good,
fine.
man.
It's fine. She can be a mutant. I don't really care.
Just
I
give
hope she
me.
eventually gets back a book or something by herself, but
I think this at least gives her an opportunity to get a book, which is good. Because since G. Willow Wilson left and she was the creator of Kamala and she was on it for like 50 issues,
yeah.
they didn't know what to do with her. And I also think that was a big part of why they killed her
Ugh.
off. Like
Yeah.
those books just they didn't sell as well. The direction of the books were weird. And then they would do miniseries with her, not actually progress her story. So like there's not, I mean, it sucks that she died and I don't like that she died, but you're killing her off to like rejuvenate her character. I hope you do, like, I hope you do a good job with it because I want to see more of her and I would rather it not be about mutants. But we'll see. It's still ongoing. That happened like 2 weeks ago. So well, it happened pretty recently. So we'll definitely get more story about that. But the point being is I think that, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse works because it's on its own island. And I think more comics need to do that for sure.
Yeah, I think the interconnected aspects of comics are really fun, but all the comics I like best are the ones that are kind of their own thing. Like I'm not a big like group team up book person really. So I really enjoy like when things are a little bit more self-contained. And I think the success of Across the Spider-Verse and the first one Into the Spider-Verse, like both of those are incredibly successful movies, incredibly well reviewed, incredibly well thought of. So like maybe we'll start to get some more contained storytelling like in these books that actually, that has a lot of love and affection for the comics, like you said, that like, has a like this gorgeous visual art style that feels like reading a comic book page. Like the Spider-Gwen stuff felt like the art of that book that I remembered. That was a very like painterly. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, I think that they just did such a good job with it.
And you look at stuff like The Last of Us, I think that from, what I understand, it was very much like the video game. Again, only
Yeah.
saw the first episode, have not played the video game. But from what it looks like from the visuals, it looked like it based it a lot on video game type of narratives. And I think that's what these movies and TV shows that try to get these IPs kind of forget, that there is a source material and you see why they work, and like make a movie because you want to try to actually adapt that source material. And I think Spider-Verse did a perfect job at that.
I agree.
But yeah, I think we are wrapping up. So any final thoughts?
If you haven't seen Across the Spider-Verse, you actually should. This is why
I don't know why you watched all of this.
you probably, yeah, I mean, I don't think we gave anything away except that it has a cliffhanger ending. But
Right, that's true.
I think you can tell from this episode that like if we were just doing a straight review, it would be like, and that part was also the best. When I asked Kat if she had any criticisms of it, she was like, no. So that should tell you how good this movie is. I think it's like,
and that's me saying that.
yeah, it's got like, it's near perfect, I think, on like Rotten Tomatoes. It is a very good movie. People aren't overhyping it. You will enjoy it. You'll have a good time seeing the movie. And I thought that they just did such a good job with it. And I'm interested to see where like part 2 goes. And I kind of like that they left it on a cliffhanger ending. I thought that was kind of fun and it felt very in keeping. It felt very comic booky, like comic correct.
Yeah, I agree. So definitely go see it. And you guys should follow all our social medias. It's mostly at legends_podcast. And then what's our email?
um, so yeah, follow us on YouTube and Instagram. We're the Legendary Ladies. Follow us on TikTok. We're on TikTok now. It's very scary for all of us. So if you would follow us, that would make us feel better. We are Legendary Ladies Pod over on TikTok. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at legends_podcast, but we actually have a new Twitter account. So you might say, oh, I'm already following that. You're not. Please go follow our new freshly renovated podcast Twitter account, legends_podcast. And then if you have thoughts and feelings about Spider-Verse or about interconnected movies or the MCU or whatever you want to share with us, you can email us thelegendaryladies@gmail.com. And I think that is all of our stuff that we need to plug. Oh, we have a Patreon.
We do.
I somehow completely forgot that. We have a Patreon. If you want to listen to episodes early, if you want to
Watch them
hop in the
live.
watch them live and hop in the live chat and talk to us and we'll talk back to you, you should become a Patreon supporter. We also are doing bonus episodes. Kat and Amy talked about whether or not Amy is emotionally ready to see Guardians of the Galaxy. It sounds like the answer was no.
The answer was no, but you could see why it was no.
We did our first trivia night, I believe, on the Patreon, and then
Mhm.
both of our trivia challenges went up on the Patreon. So I had to make a really great presentation about mukbangs. Amy had to listen to all the Beatles. So if you want to listen to any of that kind of stuff, you can check us out patreon.com/the legendary ladies and support us and get some fun extra content.
Yeah. Anything coming up from you that you want to plug?
Just the usual stuff. You can find me as a co-host on Supergirl Radio, where pretty soon the Flash movie's coming out. That's going to be our first movie big screen Supergirl since the 80s, since Helen Slater. So we are pretty hyped about it. Also, Jaden Smith told us it's going to change our lives, so we're ready for our lives to change in just a few short weeks. So you should definitely check us out. Where we'll be talking about the Flash movie pretty soon.
Yeah, and for me, I probably have a Kickstarter out or coming out. We have enamel pins, the queer enamel pins. You guys should go check out. Our newest additions are pansexual, lesbian, and non-binary. So go check that out. And then we have Slice Life issue 4. They finally kiss, and it's
Yay!
everything you've been waiting for. So go check that one out too. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. We just did a double recording of a podcast. I
We
know
are
it was a
tired.
marathon. I'm
We are tired.
exhausted. But we had a good time. Hopefully Amy will be back and all three of us will be back we're going to be doing a conversation about Flash. So if you want to, you have some time now to give your feedback about Flash. We'd love it. And tell us what else you like to see for the podcast. We got some cool plans, but we always like to hear your thoughts. But in the meantime, stay legendary.